Well, good morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you're joining us from. On behalf of everyone here at SCS Global Services, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. I'm your host, Brandon Nauman, the Technical Director of SCS's USDA Organic Certification Program. Before we dive in to the new Strengthening Organic Enforcement Rule, I'd like to take a moment to update all of you on our event platform, GoToWebinar, and how to engage with me during this webinar. So first of all, to avoid any unnecessary background noises during the presentation, all attendees have been muted, and this will remain a one-way presentation for the duration of the event. If you would like to ask a question, please go to the question section in the control panel on the upper right-hand side of your webinar console. You should see a box up there, a little drop down for a questions section. Once you type your question and hit send, your question will be sent to me directly for review. And depending on the time allotted at the end of the presentation, I'll make every effort to get to as many questions as possible. However, there is a pretty high enrollment for this webinar today, so any questions that I'm unable to answer, I'll do my best to respond after the event by email within the next couple of days. Today's presentation is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be made available to all registrants and attendees after the conclusion of the webinar. And with that being said, let's move on to understanding the USDA's new Strengthening Organic Enforcement Rule. So just to show the agenda for what we'll cover today, we'll start with just a brief introduction of SCS Global Services for anyone who's not familiar with our organization, and then we'll just jump right into the material. I'll start by presenting a high-level timeline of the National Organic Program to explain what brings us to the present moment and the upcoming rule changes. We'll go over the case for strengthening organic enforcement and how it will benefit the industry. And then the main event really will be to provide an overview of the regulatory updates and their intended impact for organic operations and certifiers. And then finally, we'll close the discussion today around how organizations can prepare themselves to comply with strengthening organic enforcement. You'll hear me use the term SOE, strengthening organic enforcement, doesn't exactly roll right off the tongue. So when I say SOE, that's what I mean. And then at the end, we'll hopefully have some time for Q&A. So to introduce SCS Global Services as an organization, we're structured as a benefit corporation with the clear purpose of advancing sustainable development goals through independent assessment, the application of sound science, and innovative solutions. Our staff of nearly 300 reside around the world and across the United States, plus at various offshore subsidiaries and affiliate offices, facilitating access to clients and understanding local issues and customs. We have 4 decades of certification and standards writing experience and diverse certification offerings of over 100 programs that serve a wide range of industries, both within food and agriculture and outside of food and agriculture. We maintain dozens of accreditations and approvals that attest our ongoing success and growth as a third-party certification body. And finally, our quality assurance department really is an integral part of our organization. Our QA director is a vice president, is seated on the board of directors. And so our quality department works closely with each one of our programs to ensure that competence and audit quality is a part of our fabric as an organization. So SCS is the early pioneer in the certification of food. We started working with the organic industry long before USDA Organic was organized into the National Organic Program. And over the years, investments in our auditing staff, program management, and technology have served us well and enabled us to grow and provide excellent services across the industry, including throughout the pandemic. So you can see here just a range of services that we offer within the food and ag scope of work. So now what I'd like to do before we jump into SOE is just to provide a brief history of organic rulemaking. And you can see on this timeline here that really organic certification as we know it in the United States dates back to around 1990. The Organic Foods Production Act, abbreviated here as OFPA, defines organic farming practices and develops the national list of acceptable organic production inputs. And it calls for the establishment of the National Organic Standards Board to assist in the development of standards for materials used in organic production and to provide recommendations to the Secretary of Agriculture for implementation of the Act. The program was expanded to be operational by October of 1993. However, efforts were hampered by lack of funding. Finally, in 1994, Congress appropriated funds for the Agricultural Marketing Service to establish the National Organic Program to implement the new standards. And then by 1997, in December, the proposed rule appears in the Federal Registrar for the first time, but the public comment period remained open through April of the next year. And then finally, in the year 2000, the National Organic Program was established. Beginning in 2009, the USDA implemented equivalency agreements with Canada, followed in 2012 by agreement with the EU, and then thereafter in 2014 with Korea and Japan. Since then, others have followed, such as Taiwan, Switzerland, and the UK now following Brexit. And then finally in 2020, we saw the publication of the Strengthening Organic Enforcement Proposed Rule, which was followed by a series of public comment periods. So really from the establishment of the National Organic Program to the first draft of SOE, the organic regulations really hadn't changed much. There had been a number of NOSB, National Organic Standards Board recommendations, various forms of guidance issued by the National Organic Program in their handbook, but the drafting of SOE really was the first time since the formation of the NOP that they have drafted significant updates to the regulations. And so finally, the final rule for strengthening organic enforcement was published just this last March, specifically March 19th, and it will go into effect on March 19th of next year, 2024, at which point all operations and certifiers must be in compliance with the new regulations. So they've given us the grace of a year to prepare for this, but that doesn't mean that we should just sit around and wait for it to happen to us for many reasons that we'll get into during the presentation today. So the case for strengthening organic enforcement. In this case, I will concur that change is good. And organic integrity is so many different things. It isn't just, having an auditor show up every year and, put you through a checklist and away you go. But, organic, as are many industries, is born, from the notion of continuous improvement. And just because we drafted a great regulation back in the year 2000 doesn't mean that it was perfect. The National Organic Program standards, as drafted, do have some gaps in them. And, it has been found over the last 2 decades of application of these standards that they're not always applied consistently. So really what SOE is trying to do is to close these gaps, enforce consistent application of the regulations, improve our capacity to detect and prevent fraud, and improve transparency throughout the supply chain. So regarding the existing gaps in the regulations, the current organic regulations carve out a number of exemptions and exclusions from certification that enable various kinds of operations that handle, buy, sell organic products to operate without organic certification. This includes many actors in the middle of the supply chain, such as brokers, traders, distributors, importers, exporters, warehouses, transportation service providers, and so forth. And the activities undertaken by these operations can create opportunities for organic integrity to be compromised, either unintentionally or intentionally. So the NOP is closing many of these gaps. And most previously exempt operations or excluded operations, and we'll get into that in a moment, will now require certification under SOE. So we'll cover all of this, and I'm sure that's why many of you are in attendance today. Certainly for us certifiers and for those of you that depend on the organic supply chains, it is of critical importance to make sure that everybody understands who must be certified so that there's not significant disruptions to the organic supply. Some areas of the existing regulations have not always been uniformly applied within the certification landscape. For example, you might see differences from one certifying agent to another in what their certificates look like, what information is included on them, how they train and qualify their auditors, for example. We'll see better guidance and consistency of the enforcement of non-compliances, mediation, and appeals, in addition to requirements for completing on-site audits, unannounced inspections. Another example is the inclusion of certification criteria for producer group operations for the first time. Certifiers have been following NOSB recommendations that date back to 2002 and to 2008 for certification of producer groups. We now finally have official guidance, official regulations to certify against. Fraud prevention is obviously a main motivating factor of SOE. The past decade has seen a number of high-profile cases that involve organic fraud. Fraudulent activities can range from the use of prohibited pesticides, fertilizers, or hormones to using prohibited ingredients in formulating products, on down to blending organic crops with non-organic crops, or just outright advertising or marketing non-organic product as organic. Many of you are aware there are innumerable other schemes and scandals that have gotten a lot of press over the last decade, and SOE really requires that certifiers and organic certified operations adopt improved supply chain traceability and fraud prevention practices. That is now written specifically into the regulations. And NOP is expanding documentation requirements for transacting organic products to improve transparency. This includes when products are imported into the United States or exported from the United States to international markets or from international markets to the US. More rigorous oversight and cooperation with US Customs and Border Protection is going to be routine with the implementation of SOE. And this will serve to improve trust and confidence that organic products represented and transacted as organic are what they're said to be. SOE will really be adding rigor at all levels of the organic supply chain. This is going to be done largely by the closure of many of the exemptions and exclusions. And this will basically shine light on previous dark spots within the organic supply chain where oversight has been lacking. With the requirement for more operations to become certified, there will be far greater rigor in how the regulations are enforced at all levels. As global trade increases, offshore oversight bodies are increasing their control and adding more rigorous documentation requirements for shipments that transit from one operation to another, including overseas shipments. So SOE is going to help our industry keep up with the times and ensure that the global marketplace remains open for trade of organic products. Along with this, it really will serve to ensure equity among certified operations through some technical corrections and points of clarification within the regulations. It will serve as a deterrent for bad actors due to the fraud prevention requirements that I spoke to briefly and we'll get into later on in the presentation. And ultimately, what we all care about is that this improves trust in the organic label. You know, we're here, we're working in this industry because we're dedicated to it, because we believe in it. And it's important that everybody that is operating in the same space as us feels the same way. So SOE really is going to help everybody, including consumers, maintain or improve that trust in the organic label. And finally, the reason that most of you are here today, I'm sure, is to really just get this download of what's in the bill. What is SOE? What are the regulatory updates that are coming our way? So we will jump right into that. Really, there are a number of different categories that SOE touches down into. The focus of this presentation is really going to be what you all as certified operations or operations that will need to become newly certified should be concerned with. There are a number of different categories of updates that really are going to affect us more as certifiers, in the procedures that we administer. But really, I know that most of you are concerned with how is this going to affect you as a certified operation. So that's going to be the focus of our presentation today. And perhaps the most significant, I say most significant, maybe the most impactful between now and March 19th of 2024 is the closure of exemptions and exclusions. Not complete closure, but reduction in these exemptions. This is going to cause the need for many operations who are currently exempt or excluded to become certified. So the byproduct of that is going to be a lot of demand for certification from now until the end of 2023, and then during the first half of 2024, as the industry really starts to respond to the closure of these exclusions and limitation of these exemptions. I'll say this a number of times probably throughout the presentation today. This is going to cause a lot of demand for certification. So if you are not currently certified and think that you're going to be impacted by the reduction in the exclusions and exemptions, start this conversation with your certifier, with the SES Organic program early, so that we can understand your needs, have time to respond to them, and fit you within our audit calendar in a time that's going to work for you and your team to obtain your certification before March 19th of 2024. Circle that date on your calendars. So to begin with, the term excluded has been eliminated from the standard, with everything now is brought under extremely limited exemptions, essentially. Exemptions are now limited to very few low-risk activities where organic integrity is unlikely to be compromised. Operations grossing under $5,000 in annual sales, for example, operations that handle products that contain less than 70% of organic ingredients, or those that only identify organic ingredients on the information panel of the product, will remain exempt. Nothing really is changing with respect to those operations. Distributors of retail products that are in tamper-evident retail packaging will remain exempt. Of course, there is already plenty of conversation around what does tamper-evident mean. No doubt, this is an example. There are many others where certifiers and NOP are going to have to coalesce around some of these definitions to determine, are you exempt? Are you not? Do your activities require certification? So one of the main takeaways here, and this was being echoed by the National Organic Program during Organic Week in Washington, D.C. just a couple of weeks ago, if you're in doubt, just get certified. Even if you are not technically required to be certified, there are benefits to obtaining certification, and we'll go into those here in just a moment. Retail establishments that don't process organic products and sell only to the end user, they remain exempt. Nothing is changing with respect to those types of retail establishments. Retailers that only process at the point of sale are partially exempt, but this must be a physical location, such as a restaurant or a salad bar. Products still cannot be represented as certified organic coming from those types of establishments, but you can have an organic salad bar, say, at your grocery store. And we'll go into those exemptions here on the next slide. So this is an example of activities that largely will require certification. And before we even get into that, I do want to make the point that compliance is still required even for exempt operations. Exemptions only extend to the requirement to become certified and to maintain an actual organic system plan. In order to engage in the organic supply chain, however, exempt operations will still be required to demonstrate compliance with applicable parts of the regulations, such as prevention of commingling and contamination, and various record-keeping requirements. So if you are an exempt operation and you are trading organic products, your buyers are going to require traceability through your hands all the way back to who you purchased the product from. So just because there is an exemption that can be leveraged here, it does not mean that you are fully exempt from the entirety of the regulations. Again, that really just extends to the requirement to be certified and to maintain an OSP. Importers and exporters of organic product must obtain certification. So if you are sourcing products that are organic certified from equivalent markets, EU, Taiwan, Japan, Korea, United Kingdom, and so forth, and you're importing those products, you must be certified. Likewise, if you're sourcing products offshore that are certified to the NOP standard from non-equivalent points of origin, you must be certified. If you're offshore and you're exporting product to the United States, same thing, you must be certified. So really the product of this is that virtually all operators in the middle of the supply chain, with very limited exceptions, must be certified. This includes brokers and traders of unpackaged organic products, regardless of whether they take physical possession of those products. So there are a lot of brokers that are operating out of a home office, but if they're transacting product that is not in a retail package, a sealed, tamper-evident container, certification is going to be required. Even if you're unloading or loading organic products, if they're not in an enclosed tamper-evident package, same with storage, certification is required. And I do see a lot of questions pouring in. I will get to these questions because I know this is probably of the most interest to most of you on the presentation today. I will go through these questions here at the end of the presentation. And again, if I don't have time to get to all of them, I will respond and follow up via email. NOP import certificates. So this is product that is coming from overseas into the United States. Again, importers and exporters must be certified. So anyone who will be involved with coordinating the issuance of NOP import certificates or reviewing them upon the product's arrival in the United States will be working directly with their certifier to ensure compliance of this process. All imports must be declared to US CBP. And so these import certificates have always been required for products that are certified to NOP equivalent standards, the European Union, UK, Korea, Japan, Taiwan. SOE requires that all imports, like I said, even products that are certified to NOP, to USDA organic in a non-equivalent market, if those are coming into the United States, those must be covered by an import certificate. These certificates are going to be issued electronically by the certifier of the offshore exporter using the Organic Integrity Database. Many of you are probably familiar with the Organic Integrity Database, otherwise known as OID, as a great resource for looking up certification status of maybe a supplier that you're working with. So NOP has been hard at work to build out functionality in OID to generate import certificates. And some of the information that must be included on those certificates is the point of origin, the destination, name of the issuing certifier, harmonized tariff codes, total weight, the standard that they're certified to, so, you know, EU or NOP or COR, etc. 10-digit exporter ID and a unique numerical identifier, so these certificates cannot be duplicated. And one thing that NOP is accommodating is for these certificates to be used either for a single shipment or multiple shipments over a defined time frame up to a verified volume. So when I was in DC a couple of weeks ago, I had a lot of engagement with the NOP on this and what mechanisms will be existing to basically reconcile this at the launch of this program and some other functionality that they hope to be building in the weeks and months that follow March 19th of 2024. So I'll be delivering another series of webinars that really drill down on each one of these topics and expand on them, and we'll go into more specific guidance about the mechanics behind these requirements and really specifically what operations can be doing to prepare themselves to be compliant with these requirements. So look for that series of webinars that we'll be following here in the weeks and months to come. And this is a graphical portrayal of how those NOP import certificates will be utilized. So again, the exporters of the organic products into the US must be certified. They may be certified to USDA organic or equivalent standards where they exist. So it will be the certifier of those exports that will verify the shipments and issue the NOP import certificates. The exporter will then provide the certificate to the US-based importer, and then that importer or their customs broker will enter the data into the Customs and Border Protection's automated control system. It's their ACE system is what it's known as. The importer will verify the products received, match the data that was on the certificate that was issued. If that data doesn't match, they should be asking questions. They should not be taking delivery of that shipment until they get a certificate that matches the product that has been received. The certifier then of the importer will audit the accepted volumes of that product and ensure that the importer is not taking delivery of more product than what has been covered on a given import certificate. The certifier of the importer will, oh, that's on there twice. they'll double audit the accepted volumes. And then the NOP will assess the CBP data to monitor for fraudulent activity. So it'll be a requirement for certifiers to flag any cases of potential or expected fraud to NOP so that they can, in cooperation with Customs and Border Protection, take action. So one of the primary motivations of SOE is improved capacity to monitor, detect, and prevent fraud. This is what is motivating the closure of many of these exclusions and exemptions, the augmented international trade requirements, and so forth. Really what we're trying to do here is deter, detect, identify, and prevent fraud. So now, for the first time, SOE has layered in some specific elements related to fraud prevention that must be included in the organic system plan. So you must maintain records as an operation that transacts organic products that span from the time of purchase or acquisition through production to sale and transport, and then be able to trace all of the inputs to the last certified operation. That hasn't really changed in practice, but there is some clarifying language now in the regulations that make it abundantly clear that this is a responsibility of certified operations. Fortunately, the closure of a lot of these exemptions and exclusions should serve over time to shorten some of those audit trails. I think there's probably many of you on this call that understand that you'll see products transacted 2, 3, 4 times through various brokers, traders, handlers, moved all around the country after arriving on our shores before they might get into your hands. And what a nightmare it can be to try to trace that all the way back to the last certificate holder. Fortunately, you can breathe easy knowing that by closing a lot of these exemptions and exclusions, it should serve to shorten that audit trail. So again, certified operations must develop, document, and implement a robust fraud prevention plan as a part of their organic system plan. SCS, as I'm sure our other certifiers across the country, are updating their OSPs to specifically request this information. It means identifying areas of risk in your supply chain and having written procedures, training your staff to implement those procedures, and recording how those are implemented. Furthermore, the expectation of certifiers' ability to monitor and detect fraud have greatly expanded. under SOE. There's going to be a lot more rigorous oversight by certifiers. We're going to be expected to be conducting risk-based supply chain audits. These could be in cooperation with other certifiers of operations that are in the supply chain of our own clients. So certifiers will be improving their cooperation with one another to do supply chain wide audits to detect and eliminate fraud in the supply chain. We'll be required to identify high-risk operations who will be subject to increased scrutiny. Things like spot audits on your documentation, on your traceability program, unannounced on-site inspections, and so forth. And it's expected that certifiers are going to be reporting evidence of fraud to the USDA when it is found with reasonable evidence. So to better support fraud detection and prevention, NOP is adding in some new requirements to the regulations related to the labeling of organic products. This applies largely to non-retail packaging. So for example, boxes, bins, totes, bulk containers, harvest crates used to transport organic products from the field to a pack house or to a processing facility. In addition to tankers, trailers, rail cars, containers, vessels, cargo holds, freighters, silos, elevators, and so on. Basically, any type of container or conveyance that you can think of, there is going to be some updates to the labeling requirements of those containers. Namely, the big one, it must identify the product as organic. Further, it must display information to link that container or that package to the audit trails, such as a lot code. And audit trail documentation that accompanies that product must identify the last certified handler of the product. It was in the proposed rule for SOE that these labels would also have to identify the certifier of the product. That did not make the final SOE bill. But still, that audit trail documentation must positively identify the last certified handler of this product, so it leaves no doubt. So the motivation here, again, is to more easily identify and trace organic products to the last certificate holder. Now, with the closure of many of these exemptions, there will be improved oversight and the need for audit trails to only span 1 or 2 transactions rather than through 3, 4, 5 levels back through the supply chain, for example. There are some updates to the requirements related to organic inspections. A lot of these are more points of clarification than functional changes per se, but it is written into the regulations now very clearly and for the first time that mass balance and traceability audits are to be a part of every organic inspection. So I know that your certifier has been doing this for many, many years. This shouldn't come as anything new to you, but it is, expressly now written into the regulations for the first time. This is supplemental to the requirement to conduct a yield analysis for producers, by the way. So most of these audits are going to cover product movements within an organization and traceability to the last certified handler, including products that are handled but not owned by the operation. And these audits may cover entire supply chains and involve other parties, such as several different operations, their certifiers, and so forth, when determined appropriate by a certifying agent. So again, there's going to be a lot more cooperation among certifiers. The same level of cooperation is expected among certified operations when suspected fraud has been identified. And by the way, there is no policy under SOE to conduct virtual or remote inspections. On-site audits are still the norm. There was a time during the pandemic where essentially certifiers were doing some risk-based virtual or remote inspections. There's no formal policy around that. And again, it should be your expectation regardless of whether you're working from a home office and this product is never even 1,000 miles from that office, an on-site audit still is required, just as it would be for somebody that is handling or processing organic products. Unannounced inspections have always been an important part of deterring organic fraud and oversight of operations by their certifiers. It is now codified into the regulations that certifiers must be conducting unannounced inspections, and they must be completed without prior notice. So these inspections may be limited in scope, or it can be a full scope audit. If your certifier shows up unannounced and does a full scope audit, that can count as your annual inspection. However, often these are going to be done supplemental to an annual inspection and might be in response to a request to investigate, or it might be in response to a failed traceability audit during the last annual audit. These may be selected randomly, they might be risk-based. As I said, they may be in response to past findings, complaints, investigations, and so forth. And one thing that's important to note is that these unannounced inspections may be conducted when an authorized representative is not present. So if we show up and it's just a warehouse manager or a janitor, but they can let you in, we have the authority to go into the facility. We have the authority to go in and collect samples for pesticide residue testing. So just know that the absence of an authorized representative for the operation does not exclude them from the requirement to subject themselves to an unannounced inspection. And certifiers must have the capability to complete unannounced inspections for any or all of its operations, regardless of their location, logistical challenges, or any other reason. And finally, for an unannounced inspection, an exit interview is not required. At long last, certifiers have been waiting for this. There's finally formal regulations for certifying producer group operations, otherwise known as grower groups. This has long been a challenging part of the regulations because official standards have never really existed. For over 2 decades now, certifiers have been following guidance issued by the National Organic Standards Boards that date back as far as 2002 and then were supplemented in 2008. Finally, now we have official guidance. The requirement for inspections by the certifier requires a sampling rate of at least 1.4 times the square root of the total number of members, or 2% of the total number of members, whichever is higher. There's also a requirement that all high-risk members, as determined by the certifier, must be subject to an annual inspection. Now, this is in a way contradictory with a preceding requirement under NOP that generally requires that every production unit, every production site receives an organic inspection. So I've actually requested clarification from NOP on this as to whether that will apply to initial inspections of producer groups or not. But this, I know, will stand at least for the annual audit after initial certification is these sampling rates here. So any of you that are currently certified by SCS or are considering certifying with SCS as an initial producer group, I will follow up as soon as we hear back from NOP on the initial inspection component. The internal control system is a requirement for producer group operations. It essentially is your written internal auditing program. There are now strengthened record-keeping requirements to facilitate traceability and mass balance of organic products, strengthened requirements for training, education, and technical assistance provided for grower group members. Protections built in for members to protect them from retribution when reporting non-compliances during internal audits, and a requirement that new members must be inspected during internal audits and that all members must be present during these internal controls system audits. Furthermore, your certifier needs to be able to observe the internal audit process. So during an initial or an annual audit, your certifier is going to want to ride along for some of these internal audits to see, one, how well trained your internal auditors are and the scope and breadth and rigor that is built into your internal audit process if you are a certified producer group. There are some changes to continuation of certification, commonly known as annual renewal. As everybody knows, this is an annual audit process that any certified operation is subject to. And this is, I think, some good news here. This is, I think, a pretty facilitative move by NOP. They've clarified that resubmission of an entire organic system plan is not required under SOE, but just any updates, any sections that have been updated since the last audit or at the time of renewal, those do need to be submitted to your certifier for review. The requirement for operations to provide updates on the correction of minor non-compliances has been removed. After all, your certifier has been working with you on the correction of those non-compliances, and we also have the opportunity during that renewal audit to kind of check in at that time and just see how those preventative and corrective actions have gone. And finally, inspections are to be required at least once per calendar year to provide greater flexibility to certifiers. Previously, the guidance was that organic inspections had to be completed no more than 6 months following the anniversary date and no more than 18 months following the prior organic inspection. That has changed to something that is a lot more easy to understand. Now they just must be completed once per calendar year, and this is not necessarily linked with that renewal cycle or the submission of annual updates. If you're a producer, if you're producing organic crops, do know, of course, that the timing of your inspection is going to be coordinated so that your certifier can observe as many activities in the field as possible. So you farmers, you producers aren't going to necessarily enjoy the same, I guess, kind of flexibility with respect to scheduling organic inspections. And really another motivator behind this is to make a nod to certifiers and their capacity. If we have a handler that is doing the same thing in January as they are in August, we have more flexibility to route our inspectors to your operation when they might be in the neighborhood anyways. So this should improve our capacity to bundle your audit with audits of other clients and can hopefully reduce audit travel expenses for many operations. And then there are some other updates here as well. Many of these are updates that really are pertaining to procedures administered by certifiers and actions associated with accreditation and other technical updates and so forth that won't largely impact procedures implemented by you certified operations. Organic certificates will be universally generated in the USDA's Organic Integrity Database. So we already talked about OID with the issuance of NOP import certificates. Another function that's being built out in OID is actually to issue organic certificates straight from the database. So this is really going to homogenize the information that is on certificates. It'll really homogenize how they look. And it'll ensure that certificate data matches what can be searched in OID. If you're a certified operation with a supply chain of a number of different certified suppliers, hopefully you're already using the Organic Integrity Database just to verify the certificate data, verify that the certificate that they have provided to you has been updated by the certifier. It's a really important step to fraud prevention. So this will serve to expand basically the services offered by OID. NOP is going to be establishing minimum experience requirements for personnel in an inspection or a technical review role, implementing minimum experience requirements of 2,000 hours or 50 hours of scope-specific training. Although this is something that largely affects certifiers, I do want to note that this requirement, combined with the closure of exemptions and exclusions, is expected to contribute to audit backlogs going into the end of this year and early 2024. It's going to be more difficult for certifiers to quickly ramp up their capacity. At the same time, this is coming when there is unprecedented demand for organic certification. So if you're not yet certified, or if you are certified but know you'll be adding new scope, new land or facilities later this year or early next year, start engaging with us now. Start engaging with your certifier months ahead of time so that you can get on the audit calendar and make sure that your needs are met in a timeline that is acceptable to you. There's some updates to non-compliance, mediation, and appeals procedures, mostly requiring that certifiers have written procedures around accepting and initiating mediation. There's also clarifications around punitive action for individuals considered responsibly connected parties to operations that have been sanctioned by adverse actions, to make sure that they cannot basically evade these sanctions by setting up a new LLC, for example. There's also some subtle clarifications, no real major changes, but just some clarifications around calculating the percentage of organic ingredients. For example, that the calculation should be completed at the time of formulation. NOP's oversight extends to staff, certifier staff, and contractors at any geographic location or satellite office. So we as a certifier, if we're opening a new site, a new office, we need to notify NOP of that, and their oversight activities of us extends not only to headquarters, but to basically anywhere that we reach. Foreign conformity assessments, this really has to do with equivalency. It's a lot of legalese more than it is any significant changes, but it's essentially written justification for how NOP determines equivalent standards and so forth. And then there's a number of technical corrections and points of clarification that were made to the regulations. So really, this has been a high-level overview, as you know. I've expanded mostly on the areas of SOE that are going to affect you certified operations, or you operations that are not yet certified but will need to be. There will be a series of webinars over the coming months that SCS will be promoting and delivering that do a little bit more of a deep dive on each one of these topics that I've covered today. So if you've not yet engaged with the rules, Google strengthening organic enforcement. You can read the entire legislation. It's not necessarily the easiest read, to be quite honest. It's really dense. That makes 60-some pages of 3 columns dense. So what I would actually do is encourage you to go and utilize USDA's side-by-side comparison, or to become an OTA member. OTA is the Organic Trade Association. They put great resources out there for their members that are incredibly easy to understand. They are a wealth of knowledge and really an organization that I would encourage anybody engaged in the industry to become a part of. If you have any questions about this, contact SCS. We'll be happy to point you in the right direction and let you know if you're going to be affected by the new rulemaking. So what can organizations be doing to prepare right now? I mentioned, do join OTA. They're a great resource, but contact your certifier. If you're certified by SCS, if you are not yet certified, contact us. Ask, how am I going to be affected by this? What can I be doing right now? What should I be thinking about to prepare for this, to make sure that I'm not caught off guard? You know, while we can't consult, we can't write a program for you or give you prescriptive guidance, we really can get you most of the way there in understanding how you'll be affected by SOE. If you're working with another certifier, reach out to them. They'll be happy to help. If you're currently uncertified, if you're unsure whether exemptions will continue to apply to your operation, if you're in doubt, just get certified. The benefits to certification are many. Even if you're not required to be certified, You basically can better protect the identity of your suppliers if you want to keep that information confidential. Your buyers will only have to trace these purchases back to you. It will make the documentation and audit trail audits much shorter, much simpler, and it will give you the assurance that you've got a great resource here in your corner that's here to support you and help you comply with the regulations. Thousands of operations are going to be newly required to be certified, and so there's already record demand for certification. It's only going to increase in the months to come, so don't wait. Start this process now. March 19th of 2024, believe it or not, really isn't that far off. Engage with the regulations. The new regulations under SOE have already been updated in the 7 CFR Part 205. So, if you're already certified, I know that you've got the 7 CFR Part 205 bookmarked in your internet browser. If you don't, bookmark it, access it. Everything that is in SOE has already been written into the organic regulations. So again, this was an overview of the upcoming changes. SCS will be continuing our webinar series to go deeper into many of these topics and to provide valuable insights and guidance for how to comply. So don't miss these opportunities. Open those emails as they come in from SCS, and we'll make sure that you are registered and in attendance for the upcoming series. So I want to thank everybody so much for your time. Thank all of our guests who listened and asked questions. I'm going to take a few moments to go through some of these questions here shortly. I will get to as many as I can. There are a ton, so I can assure you I'm not going to be able to get to all of these questions, but we will follow up via email if I'm not able to get to your question here today. This presentation recording will be sent out to all registrants and attendees within the next 24 hours. You will get a recording of the presentation. You will not get a copy of the slide deck, but you can watch this as many times as you'd like in the future. And as you go through this, as questions come up that maybe I didn't answer today, please reach out. I'll be happy to help you and to make sure that you understand if and how you'll be impacted by SOE. We hope that everyone will be able to join us for our next webinar scheduled for June 21st. That will be covering critical control points and testing requirements for gluten-free certification with the SCS gluten-free certification program. So you should be receiving an email notification about that webinar soon. Until then, we hope that all of you stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for your commitment to organic integrity. So what I will do now is just go through some of these questions and get to as many that I can in the next 5-10 minutes or so. Okay, we have a company that buys and sells from approved suppliers and then sells to distributors. They have no facility, no contact with any product, just a sales and procurement company only. We collect organic certificates, client profiles from our suppliers. We have no third-party audits completed, but we do collect those from our suppliers also. What changes should we look into? Well, first of all, this is a great question, and probably it's really similar, to some of the most common questions that we get here. Really, the bottom line is if you're transacting products that are not in a retail package or otherwise fully enclosed, fully protected from potential contamination with prohibited materials, in tamper evident packaging. If you're transacting that product and it does not meet those requirements, you need to be certified. So reach out to us. We'll be happy to walk you through this. Really, the best way to think about the exemptions and the exclusions is that they really are designed for retail level distributors. So your KHEs of the world, for example, are not going to necessarily require organic certification, although maybe they are certified. But there's innumerable distributors out there that are working in the retail space. They're only transacting sealed organic products. Those distributors can rest assured that their exemptions still will remain intact. If you don't meet that description and you're a broker, you're a trader, you're a distributor of bulk product, of unpackaged product, of product that, think of even a melon box, think of packaged peaches or citrus, a box that does not have a complete enclosure that has any openings or holes in it, and you're a produce distributor of non-retail product in these kind of more open type packages, that does not count as being fully enclosed, fully sealed in the tamper evident package. So really the way to think of it again is if you're transacting largely retail product or product that is very, very tightly packed in pretty sophisticated tamper evident packaging, you are going to require certification. Similar question, a broker that's transacting products that is in bulk boxes but sealed with tamper evident tape, would that still qualify if we continue to get the appropriate affidavits? Potentially, yes. So if this product is in bulk totes that are impermeable, that fully protect the product from contact with prohibited substances while in transit or in storage, protect the product fully from commingling with other non-organic products, and it is tamper evident, there's a good chance that that will continue to be covered under exemptions and exclusions. Definitely reach out to us or whatever certifier you might be working with just to make sure that those containers meet the definition of tamper evident. What is the minimum timeline the minimum to maximum timeline for a broker from start to finish of an audit? Really common question, really tough one to answer. Really, a lot of that depends on how complete your organic system plan is during the first submission. Before we are going to show up and do an organic inspection, we need to see in the OSP that you have procedures in place to comply with the regulations. So from the time of receiving an organic system plan that is complete, that is audit ready, by no means does this guarantee that there might, not still be findings. Notice of noncompliance, for example, issued after initial inspection. That is really common. So I always give this information assuming there is going to be a need for a noncompliance and resolution process. Minimally, we recommend 3 to 4 months, especially in this landscape of increased demand. We have auditors that are flying all across the country, all around the world. You've got to get on our calendar, and that has to be after we can perceive an ability to comply with the regulations. SCS does offer expedited services as well for a fee, so we can shorten that timeline quite dramatically as far as how long it takes for us to review a report, or how long it takes an inspector to turn in that report, or how long it takes us to respond to a noncompliance. But a lot of this really is dictated by how quickly an operator can provide a complete organic system plan, or how quickly you can respond to a notice of noncompliance, for example. If March 2024 comes by and you're no longer exempt or excluded, is your operation at a standstill until complete? As far as we know, yes. NOP is not giving any flexibility on that March 19th of 2024 deadline. So I don't have any information to answer that question other than a resounding yes. If you're required to be certified and are not yet certified by March 19th of 2024, you would be putting your operation at significant legal risk if you continue to transact organic products after that date. Is there any information on how the trailers will be labeled? I'm assuming it will not be permanent labeling. Correct. So trailers can have basically anything either affixed on them or in the custody of the driver that identifies that product. That has been clarified by NOP. So it's not prescriptive of what these labels must look like. What is prescriptive is the information that must be on them. And there are dozens and dozens and dozens of other questions coming in. Thank you all so much for these questions. We are now just at the top of the hour, so I do need to draw the presentation to a close. But again, rest assured, all of these questions are being compiled and will be sent to me to answer. Be patient. There are a lot of them, so I'll do my best to get to your questions here as quickly as possible. If you haven't received a response to your question within the next, 5 to 7 business days, follow up with an email. I think that the presentation has now gone black, but hopefully you've grabbed my email address from that last slide. Reach out to SCS Global Services. Even if it lands in the hands of somebody other than myself, it will find its way to me. So thank you all so much. We appreciate your attendance and we look forward to seeing you during our upcoming webinars. Thank you.